Good morning again, everyone. I will now give the Dharma talk. I wanted to mention this quote that I had said earlier, and so I'll read it again, that the Buddha in the causal stage made the universal vow, when beings hear my name and think on me, I will come to welcome each of them. Not discriminating at all between the poor and the rich and the well-born, not discriminating between the inferior and highly gifted, not choosing the learned and those upholding pure precepts, not rejecting those who break precepts and whose evil karma is profound, solely making beings turn about and abundantly say the Nembutsu, I can make bits of rubble turn into gold. So this metaphor of rubble into gold is speaking to the transformational aspect of Jodo Shinshu. So Jodo Shinshu, we're trying to practice the Nembutsu, right? So that is our practice, is saying the Nembutsu. But here it's actually to hear my name, it said. So it's not just saying the Nembutsu, but it's also hearing the Nembutsu, or hearing the voice of Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha being, of course, the infinite wisdom and compassion that always surrounds us. So Amida Buddha isn't somebody that comes up to you and like whispers in your ear, like namandas, and then you say it. But it's the universal kind of things around us. It's all of us. It could be anything speaking to us, trying to awaken us to this, trying to make us realize, trying to get us to say truly with our hearts Nembutsu, to live a life of Nembutsu. And so it is supposed to be this transformational thing, and it's talked about as this, making beings turn about. But this goes back to the historical Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago, right? And he meditated under a tree and then came to this realization. And so we like to mythologize and try to, kind of make this person into larger than life. And I think when people have this image in their head, it's like, oh, this incredible person, he's fantastic, amazing, had all these powers, all these magical things happening. And while it's important for us to sort of, keep it as like a legend, and every aspect of that does have some significance to our teaching, the Buddha, at the end of the day, was a person, just like the rest of us. So there really was no difference in what made up the Buddha as well as what made up us. And that's kind of the amazing part of Buddhism, is that this person who did it opens up this path for all of us because we are just like the Buddha. In realizing enlightenment, kind of along this same line, we think that there's something that happens, that there's something that the Buddha attained, right? You attained enlightenment. He got it. He found it. He got something. And so it changed him because he was able to grasp or hold on to whatever this enlightenment was. However, fundamentally, nothing changed. Nothing changed with him. So he had this understanding, he had this realization, but everything was still as it was before. He had this understanding, he realized something, but nothing changed physically. So there wasn't any kind of physical change. In the same way, when we have this sort of our own awakening, our own turning about, our own realization of Shinjin, there's many different names for it, nothing fundamentally changes about our life. And yet, it's like this rubble turning into gold. So how does this transformation happen, and how do we understand it or realize it? Now, there isn't one way for this to happen, and that's one of the frustrating things about Jodo Shinshu. It isn't they don't give you this like guide of like, okay, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you get it, and this is how you know you got it. But because, as mentioned in this quote, there is no discrimination between whether someone is rich or poor, whether they are very good at practicing or they're not, whether they're a monk or they're a layperson. Because of that, we can't have this sort of guideline, because if we make out these steps for someone to follow, and it's very clear, then inevitably it ends up leaving certain people out if they can't follow it, down to the letter. And so Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, the very heart of it is it being a universal teaching, a teaching that anyone can participate in, anyone can benefit from. It means that we can't discriminate against anyone, meaning that we can't set out these specific steps that would inherently discriminate against certain people. So we don't have this path to follow that's very clear. All of us must take our own individual path. So based on our own abilities, our own understandings, our own time, how we are able to do it, it's up to each of us. And it comes down to, as I mentioned before, these two aspects of looking inwards and realizing our kind of limited self, foolish nature, and looking outwards and realizing we're always surrounded by this infinite wisdom and compassion. However, where this idea of turning rubble into gold means that not only do we find, ourselves as important or valuable, where, a lot of times you kind of have this self-loathing and we don't see ourselves as valuable, but we also see everything else differently. So we see things and the way we interact with the world as differently. So it's not that the world around us changes, and it's not like we grab anything or we get anything new, but rather all the things that have always been around us, we're able to see them in sort of this different light. There's this like slight change in how we view the world, because again, we don't fundamentally change. We still have these kind of selfish thoughts, these greedy thoughts, but we're able to view the world a little bit differently. That helps us to live a life, hopefully, with this like less of suffering. So I wanted to give a real life example. Is everyone still with me? A little bit. You know what? It's summer service. Anyone have any questions about it? No? Okay, all right. So I wanted to give a real life example because I feel like that's always helpful. So this morning, I was running a little bit late because I wanted to install a hose in the front of our house. So it's very hot, right? We'll have kind of a quick service because we don't want to get out there when it's too hot. But it's very hot this weekend, and so we have to water the plants a little bit more. And usually, we have this like cute little watering can that we can like pour in the stuff. But it's easy enough when you have like a hose. And so I have a hose, and like it came in the mail like a week ago. So I'm trying to like get it installed and stuff. It's been a while. But I was like, you know what? We already had when we got the house, this, the hose thing where you roll it, and this one's plastic, but I know there's like metal ones and stuff. So I figured like, how hard can that be to install it? It just goes like this. You put the hose, you go like that, and you hook it up, and it's fine, right? So like it'll take me 5 minutes to do it. I'll do it before I have to get ready for service. So I go downstairs, I try to, I get all the things ready, I go outside, and I start putting it together, and it's not that easy. I don't know if anyone's installed something like that, but like 20 minutes later, I was like, oh, this was terrible. So it's around the thing right now outside my house, but if you unroll it, then one side goes in and one side goes out, so it doesn't work. Anyway, I got really frustrated with that. I didn't set nearly enough time. I was like, it's gonna take me 5. It took me way more time, and so I'm coming in. I got to rush to like put on everything and go to temple. And so I'm telling my wife, I was like, oh, I'm so frustrated right now. I thought this was gonna be super easy, and it ended up taking way more time, and it's still not fixed. I got to come back and redo it. And she tells me, she goes, you do this a lot. You think that it's gonna take you only like a couple minutes, and it takes way longer, and you end up getting super frustrated. So I now have a choice of how I respond to this. I could be very, vindictive maybe. I could get really defensive and like completely turn it back on her and be like, you know what? Well, you're late all the time whenever we have to leave the house because you're a girl and you have to find all these different outfits and your hair and stuff. And that would have ended very terribly, right? Or there's another way of looking at it, and I was just like, yeah, you're right. I do that a lot. I have this tendency to want to fix things or do things around the house, and I'm like, I could do that, no problem. Because like in my head, it makes sense that it would be very simple to do. And so I put aside very little time to do it. And then it ends up taking me way longer, and I'm like, this took way longer than I wanted it to, and now I'm all mad. But I do end up doing that. So this is this one aspect of this transformation where when we come across different parts in our life, different things that happen in our life, we have these options of we have one way to react, which is full of this ego and selfishness and ends up lashing out on other people or ourselves. Or we have this other way where we have Amida Buddha kind of like whispering into our ear, like trying to tell us about compassion, about wisdom, and like there's all these kind of buzzwords from Buddhism, but ultimately it's whatever the opposite of ego and selfishness is, right? So that's where this transformation comes, where in our lives, in the future, inevitably, I'm going to try to do this again. I'm going to put not enough time, and I'm going to get frustrated. However, in this next time, again, I can look at it in one way of like, you know what, I really want to be good at this. I want to be amazing. I want to look good. I want to show off how incredible I am. Or we can look in this other way and be like hearing the Nembutsu, hearing Amida Buddha telling us, why are you really doing this? Like, are you doing this to look amazing, or are you doing this to make your life and the family's life easier? Are you doing this for the compassion of the greater good? No matter how big this greater good is, whether it's just myself or my wife or for the community. And so each of us have this opportunity within ourselves, and it does take work. It takes effort for us to think on ourselves, to self-reflect, to think about things that we've done in the past, think about things we can do in the future. But when we have this turning of heart, when we see this realization of realization of Shinjin, like I was talking about before, however you want to put it, whatever words you need, this shift in our mentality, it changes so that when we react to the things in life that inevitably happen, when things don't go our way, where we don't have control, we can react in one of the two ways. And instead of always choosing this path of selfishness, we choose this path of compassion. So this is one way of understanding this idea of rubble turning into gold. I know there's many other ways in our lives that we can take that we can try to shift whatever it is with like karma or our minds or the world around us. But when we think about how we can react to the world around us when it's trying to kind of teach us, trying to get in contact with us, no matter what it is. It doesn't have to be, your significant other. It can be your kids, it could be a pet, it could be by yourself, it could be a TV show. There's all these things that are constantly trying to talk to us, and it's up to us to listen. So that's why it comes out as hearing Amida's voice, hearing the name, hearing the Nembutsu. We have to be open to hearing it, to listening, and actually really taking it and doing something with it in our lives. So when we do that, that's when this transformation happens. And all of these transformations, it's like not just, one thing and then you're good, but it's constantly happening throughout our lives. That's when we can really start to see the benefit of Jodo Shinshu changing who we are, even though ultimately nothing ever really changes. Okay, any questions now? No? All right. It was good? It was okay? Okay. Okay, if you could please rise for our closing gatha, we'll be singing Farewell.